protesting against Trump, so that was pretty cool.
Was it the one I was with you at?
Man,
On campus?
No. It was
Okay.
before that actually.
Okay.
And,
Quick intro. All right.
Yeah, cool.
I'm Oscar Duran. This is the Land of Enlightenment podcast. Welcome, guys. If you're watching live, awesome. This is live. I don't know if I told you it was live.
Okay.
It's cool. You can look at me.
Surprise!
You can look at the camera. Either way, it's
Yeah.
live, and then I'm recording it and posting it up later.
Sounds great.
You can share
Sounds
it.
great.
But yeah, welcome, man. I really
Cool.
appreciate
Thank
you
you
being
for
on.
having me.
Do you want to? This is what I do. I typically allow you to introduce yourself because I feel like you know yourself the best.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay. Who are you?
My name's Timothy Green IV. I'm currently a doctoral student, but before that, I'm a father and a husband. I'm a doctoral student in the political science department at the University of New Mexico. My area of specialty is international relations and comparative politics, and within that, I specialize in human rights and transitional justice, primarily international criminal tribunals, and then, as of recent, more memory, reconciliation, and post-conflict societies. So,
Okay.
that's just a little bit about myself.
So that class we took this last semester with Layla was actually very kind of relevant to what you were doing?
Yeah, it was relevant. However,
A portion of it was at
a
least.
portion of
Yeah,
it, but
yeah.
it was really cool because it challenged me because it was more from a literary perspective, right?
Okay.
And within political science, it's more analytic, theoretical,
Yeah.
practical,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you could just study transitional justice in so many different facets. And so I gleaned a lot from it. I just wish that I would have spoke Spanish or Portuguese and
So,
stuff.
so yeah, do you know any Italian? Because you had studied in Italy.
No.
Okay,
No.
and did you have experience with Spanish?
Muy poco.
Muy poco. Okay,
yeah, very
and then
little.
no Portuguese, I'm assuming. Before
No.
that. No.
A
So
little
now,
bit.
now,
Yeah, I know a
okay.
little bit.
But so you went in, and all of a sudden, everyone's speaking this language, and you're trying to understand what you're doing in that language.
Yeah, exactly. But
it
it was crazy. So make a long story. I was adopted by Chicanos, so I've lived African American in Chicanos.
Okay,
so I've heard
let's talk about you.
I've heard
Yeah.
Spanish, and so I had an ear, so I can kind of
Okay.
understand what's going on and what's being said.
Yeah.
I just been never formally taken a class, and so.
Okay. So what's your story? Are you from Albuquerque?
Oh man, no, I was not born here. I'm a military kid.
Okay.
My father and my mother in the military. I was born in El Paso, Texas, Fort Bliss military base.
Mm.
And I lived here, St. Louis, Mississippi. I went to high school in Mississippi, Oxford,
Okay.
Mississippi.
Okay.
I went to Highland High School. I went to a couple different high schools.
So you went to high school here?
Yes.
Or you graduated from high school here? Is that
Yeah, I
what-
did,
That's
actually.
I'm assuming that's why you landed up here.
Yeah. So
That's as they say in New Mexico.
exactly.
I landed up here.
The land of enlightenment, the land of entrapment, whatever.
Land
you
of
wanna call it.
enchantment, land of mañana.
Exactly.
Land of mañana, which is so if you're listening to this, you just heard a female laugh. You probably
Yes.
don't know that Kate's on here.
Yeah.
'Cause She's fielding questions for
I'm
us.
hiding in the background.
Hi, Kate.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome,
Sorry, I
everybody.
didn't introduce yourself
No,
right
it's
away.
cool.
I completely spaced it.
But I'm a Burkindian. I'm a Burkindian at heart.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I claim it. I've been
How old
here.
are you?
I'm 30 years old.
You're 30 years old. So so you've been here your whole adult life?
Pretty much my whole life.
Okay.
And my whole adult life, yes.
So in Highland, just to throw this out there, so you graduated maybe in 2004,
2005.
2005. So Highland around then, I mean, it's been known as like the black school.
Yeah.
It's known as the black
Yeah.
school. Back then, was that before Katrina? Katrina was in 08?
Yeah, it was still majority school, right?
Okay.
Predominantly African Americans.
The reason I bring it up is because Albuquerque's population was pretty much just all Hispanic, most, and then white, and then very little. You were like
still is.
You were like the second black person in town.
Yeah, it's we're the, how do we say, we're a minority within a minority.
Okay.
So then it creates pretty interesting dynamics within the community.
So what was that like going to school in Albuquerque, where you were the minority within the minority?
I didn't know we were talking about my high school days.
No, I mean my experience was that I'm a Mexican American kid
Right.
in Hispanic community.
Right.
But the Hispanic, I'm not the right Hispanic.
Right, of course.
There's New Mexican, Spanish, Hispanic.
Uh-huh.
and then there's Mexican American, and they
Of
don't
course,
like us
of course.
Mexicans.
And then there's Chicano.
And then there's Chico, and then there's Chico. So you know the difference.
Oh yeah,
And
of
then
course.
there's
I've been in New
Chicano.
Mexico for a long
Right,
time.
I'm Mexican American. So I can kind of maybe understand, but what's your experience?
You know, going to school,
Yeah.
it was it was tumultuous at times because we were underprivileged. A lot of us were very poor going to Highland.
Yeah.
You know, in that district alone, we
Yeah.
just were a lot of poor kids, and we let our frustrations manifest through violence against one another. So a lot of times it was blacks and Asians would have alliance, and we would beef with the Latinos.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, to the point where people were pulling out guns and police on campus, and there was major fights. I mean, we're talking about like 20, 30 students going at each other, and at lunch, just full out, people getting stabbed. You couldn't go to the bathroom by yourself because you would get jumped. I mean,
It was intense.
oh, it was crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
Highland has that reputation.
Well,
but it's
Highland
like-
had that reputation, I think, going back to in the 90s. It
yeah,
was
of
more
course.
intense.
It's the area in which, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was in the formerly known as the War Zone.
Yeah, now it's the
Now it's
International District, right.
I'm like,
Which-
oh, I don't know about that, but okay.
It's a nice name, right?
It's a nice name.
Right,
It's
right.
labels, man.
Exactly.
But it's funny how the it's now East Nob Hill touches International District.
Oh, I didn't even know there was an East Nob Hill.
Oh yeah, man.
So it's not just Nob, it's just East Nob.
Yeah, my apartment complex used to be called the Highland Apartments,
Mm.
and now they're called the Nob Hill Apartments.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's over by Sprouts on Loomis and San Mateo. So, and there's just Sprouts right across the street, which is food for a certain demographic and socioeconomic
Yeah, of
status
course,
of
of
people.
course.
So it's right. So it's funny how that creeps over, man.
Yeah.
I could talk about
Gentrification. and the
gentrification,
effects
art,
of it.
all that. Did any of this go influence what you studied? What'd you get your undergrad in?
I have an undergraduate in Africana Studies and Political Science,
Okay.
and then my master's in Political Science as well.
Okay. So it was all poli-sci.
Yep.
Oh,
all poli-sci.
what got you into that?
Politics. Probably my grandfather. My
Oh,
grandfather. Ever since
okay.
I was a child.
Okay.
Just always telling me the truth. He was a truth teller,
Mhm.
and just speaking the truth, no matter if that truth was uncomfortable at times, whether it had to do with race, socioeconomic status, international relations, gender. He just always was telling me what was right and what was wrong, and
Yeah.
what was democracy was about, and justice. And so I think that stuck with me. And ever since then, I just was like politics. And at first, it was more domestic, more American.
Okay.
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
I don't know. I just started reading, and I've been
Okay. What were you reading?
at that time when I was young. I was reading everything from Karl Marx, to Huey P. Newton, to Elaine Brown, Angela Davis, David
Okay.
Thoreau. I mean everything, all the classics, of course.
Yeah.
Going through the classics. What was I into a lot at that time? That really sparked my international relations. I think I discovered some old Du Bois before he died.
Okay.
From like 1913, 19.
Yeah.
It was old. And he was kind of going more towards international relations. And it was a quote from him. And it kind of made me start thinking, wow. It was just kind of talking about World War II. And about,
Mhm.
he's a critical race theorist. And so he was saying that World War II was nothing more than European nations fighting one another to see who will dominate the world.
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
even said
Yeah.
even America's invasion was to see who would dominate, right?
Yeah.
And so-
America's kind of
right.
wanting to kind of get in on that.
Of course. And so I think it was that quote, and I was like, whoa, dominate the world, superpower. And so
Mhm.
then I started delving deeper and deeper and started taking political science courses.
Okay.
Then I met Dr. Powers, Dr. Kathy Powers.
So I haven't taken a course with Kathy Powers.
Yeah, matter of fact, go to her, tell her Tim sent you, and she'll take care of you. She's
Oh.
great.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
she will.
so-
She's
okay.
great. She mentored me all the way through.
Everyone I know that's taken poli-sci courses with her
Right.
has just had nothing but the best to say about
Yeah,
it.
yeah, she's amazing. And from there, I think
Yeah.
my international
Yeah.
relations and comparative interest grew. And then I just dove headfirst and
And then you just found what transitional justice, right?
yeah, transitional justice. And it was through Dr. Powers and where I first discovered what transitional justice was.
What is that? Can you explain it to our audience?
Yeah, transitional justice is really it's a subset of human rights, and it's not really a special form of justice. However, it's justice that's implemented in the aftermath of authoritarian rule or civil war. And oftentimes state capacity fails, right? Institutions, they don't have government. They can have a lot of corruption. Former perpetrators who committed human rights violations can sometimes be high figures within the government. So then the possibility of redress for perpetrators and victims is very, very slim.
Okay.
And so what they do is, within transitional justice, it's an implementation of these justice mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
And there's usually 4 to 6 of them. It depends. But the top 3 are usually truth commissions, right? And you have trials, criminal trials. And you have reparations.
Okay.
And then you also have lustration and vetting. And then as of recently, there's memory and reconciliation, like memory works within.
Right.
And then finally there's lustration, vetting, and institutional reform. So if institutions are corrupt, then they reform it.
Okay.
And so experts will come in from all over the world. And so a case would be, current case of transitional justice right now could be Colombia, right?
Okay.
The
What's going on there?
Right, yeah, exactly. So that's one of the most current cases of transitional justice.
Which is with the FARC, you mean?
Yes, exactly, with the FARC transitioning from guerrilla warfare to handing over their weapons and receiving some type of amnesty, I think, for them telling the truth. And so that's been some of the criticism, I believe, is that
but there's amnesty, but they're also asking for like actual seat at the table politically.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And so that's been some of the criticism from the community, is that they're being too lenient upon the FARC when it comes to punishment, right?
Okay.
Some victims say, well, that's not enough. They shouldn't have a seat at the table. They've been terrorists for a long time.
Okay. So
While others are saying,
who's the victims and who's saying that they're not being harsh enough with the punishment?
so I think it's a generational gap. I have some Colombian friends, but I'm not there on the ground. I'm not doing the research, so I can't say definitely. But there is a generational gap for those who have lived through FARC,
Okay.
and those saying that they claim that they're terrorists.
Uh-huh.
Then you have this younger generation who says, we've been living in this civil war for the last 54, 55 years, right? The longest civil war in the Western Hemisphere. We just want this to end. And let's try to have some type of reconciliation, some type of transitional justice process. And so I think there's that aspect. And then there's a bunch of different dynamics. And so
Okay. Well, the reason I asked who's saying what, takes me back to Venezuela, which is their neighboring country.
Right.
They're going through a lot of stuff right now.
Right.
And I think a lot of things get lumped in together, and you're saying a lot of the times, like, okay, of course there's victims, and they need to be, there needs to be reconciliation. There needs to be, things need to happen, right? Justice needs to be served, but to an extent, who's the victim? If it's the rich person who's not making as much money as they were before, because now more it's going to the poor, is that justice?
Oh no, I think that's a good question. Who is a victim, right? Because there's a very thin line of victim and perpetrator. Because at one time period you can be a victim.
Yeah.
But with the collapse of the state, at another time period you may have to be a perpetrator in order to survive. And so in order, but no, I think in Colombia the victim are those who were killed, maimed, or their land was taken forcibly.
Okay.
And a lot of those were the people in the countryside, right? Indigenous people of Colombia.
Okay.
And so I think, but then they had the referendum, right? And the people got to vote on it. And that was an interesting vote. Remember, the people voted to see if they wanted to allow FARC to have amnesty or not.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the people voted, and the people voted no, for peace. That's what the vote was, for peace.
The vote was for no?
And the people voted no, they don't want to allow, they don't want peace and reconciliation with FARC. The people voted no against it.
Did they know what that meant?
Well, that's some of the, I'm sure there's papers being written about it right now, if they knew what it was meant. Because, the people voted, and it was an actual time where the president allowed the people to vote on an instance of peace negotiation, and the people voted no. And it was very, very slim. We're talking like 0.2, 0.4% margin.
It was like down the middle.
Yeah, right down the middle. And that night there was like rain slides in the northern part of the country, and so there was all these, different factors that played in, but the people voted no. So then from there, the president took it up to, I want to say the Supreme Court or the Congress. I'm sorry. They voted on it in Congress, and then it passed that they were going to have a peace negotiation.
Okay.
They were going to hand over arms, and then they were going to have a seat at the political table.
Okay. So where does like this justice actually happen? Does it happen at the ground level, or does it happen with the people voting for it and wanting it, or does it happen when now it's okay to happen?
Oh man, where does the justice happen?
I'm
right?
thinking of Chile, where Pinochet, it wasn't until most of them died that they were starting kind of seeking these was it truth commissions or
Truth commissions, trials. I think that's a good question though. Where does justice happen, or how?
yeah, like where does it start? Does it start with the people asking for it? Does it happen when it's okay for the elite to get away with what they want to get away with?
Well, I think I think
maybe that's kind of a leading question.
I mean, I think that's the ultimate question. That's a PhD worthy question. Where does justice occur within transitional justice?
Yeah.
Or the concept of justice, right?
Right.
It depends, because some would say you have a two-tier system of justice.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is that the first world nations, the members particularly of the P5. Oh man, I think I unplugged it. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
It was something weird happened.
The,
I know.
the members of the P5 basically don't have to answer to the ICC, which is the International Criminal Court.
Yeah.
And so this creates, some would say, in the LDCs, less developed countries, this would create a two-tiered system. So basically, the Security Council and members of the P5 can recommend countries who are going through political turmoil, whether it's civil war or authoritarian regime. But nobody can investigate the United States, Russia, China, Britain,
There's a list.
or France. Well, the P5 members, the permanent 5 members of the Security Council.
Right. So
Yeah.
they're
So they're immune.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
the human rights violations that occur within America will not be investigated by the ICC. Number one, because we're not signatories to it, and number two, because we're members of P5 Council and will always veto the vote.
Anything that says that we're under investigation.
Right. But, I think justice is more nuanced than just, because there has to be justice at a domestic level, at a regional level.
Yeah.
And so you may not get the justice that you want at the international level. You may not have access to the ICC, but there may be regional courts, or there may be domestic ways of justice. And trials are not the only way. Criminal trials are not the only way to justice. Some would argue, yes.
Yeah.
And some would argue that there are other forms, restorative justice mechanisms rather than retributive. And so,
Which is there one that works best?
depends on who you ask. I think if you would ask a lawyer would say the retributive justice would work the best, right?
Why would they say that?
Because it's law based, and
Okay.
and you need trials. And I think lawyers have a point. They would argue that law in itself is truth telling. It's a truth telling mechanism.
Okay.
So while you have truth commissions, and they're very important for the narrative of the country in the aftermath of violence,
Yeah.
I think trials themselves also establish a narrative and a truth, right? A very official one, and also
Mhm.
provide history, because there's so much documentation.
That's the word I was
Now
thinking of.
the truth may be black and white, and it may not be contextualized given like people's personal statements
Mhm.
and their personal experiences, and that truth may be very narrow and very
It's not black and white.
right. So
Yeah.
I don't think that one works better than the other, but I think that there needs to be a combination of both. You can't just have a single mechanism, and each transitional justice mechanism and mechanisms are particular to the context of the conflict.
Okay.
To have a cookie cutter idea or the cookie cutter vision of what works in one conflict zone and should be applied to another is disastrous,
Mm-hmm.
because you need to understand what the people need. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Transitional justice is a victim-oriented process,
Right.
and it's designed to bring some type of cathartic healing, to bring communities together in the aftermath of genocide. I mean, just these horrible, horrible human rights violations, and so it's very delicate.
Right. So it's which kind of leads me to, well, for obvious reasons, you had a course. You got tissue. You got to sneeze.
Excuse me.
Okay. No, that's. Yeah, well, he's got a slight cold. It happens. Is it allergies? That's New Mexico for you, man.
Yeah, man.
You don't expect it.
Yeah, it just creeps up on you.
Dude, it's funny how much of nature's trying to kill you here, how many people end up here.
Yeah,
You know?
but I love it. You know, I love New Mexico. It's unique. It's a unique place.
It's definitely unique.
It is.
I
it
know,
is.
and the food's killer, man. So.
Oh, it's great. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I was
man.
imagining some New Mexican food in Berlin. I think you could make some real money. I'm talking like.
Oh
some,
yeah, dude. I mean, I would think that would be its biggest export.
I drove by
Yeah.
on the bus. I was riding the bus or the rail. I don't know what the heck I was riding, but
Yeah.
we rode by this Mexican joint, and it just looked very generic
It
and just didn't look good at all.
Was it called Chili's?
No,
Just kidding.
no.
Which is really fun. No, I remember the first time I heard somebody say, "Oh, let's go get Mexican." It was on the East Coast,
Uh huh.
and I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds good." And they're like, "Yeah, let's go to Chili's," and I was like, "What?"
Oh no.
My first reaction was like,
No.
because I had never thought of Chili's as a Mexican place.
Yeah.
But I guess their theme is Mexican food.
I guess that's what you want to call it. It's like I was in Paris, and one of the only places next to our hotel was like the Southwest Grill. It was Southwest Grill and McDonald's, and I usually don't eat McDonald's, but I was like, you know what? I'm from the Southwest. I'm not gonna be in Paris eating at the Southwest Grill.
Yeah, I'll go to eat at Mickey D's, I guess.
And people were so happy eating their Southwest Grill, and the food the guacamole looked disgusting. It was horrible.
Dude, it just doesn't compare.
No,
Man.
not
It
at
just
all.
doesn't compare. I
No.
mean, and you don't go to a different country to try the
No,
food from
no,
here
no.
either. But no, you could probably make a killing though.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, I don't know if they can handle the spicy though.
Yeah, in Berlin, yeah, I don't know either, actually.
They have the hottest thing they have is like currywurst, right? Which is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but
And then the Chili's at the Vietnamese places for pho. That's about it.
yeah, that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so you were in Berlin. That's where I was going. So you were in Berlin.
I was in
you were
Berlin.
teaching a class.
I was co-instructing a course in Berlin.
co-instructing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's different.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
What
It
was it on?
and so part of co-instructing I was able to teach. So it was
Okay.
So it was a 4-week course. It's biannual, and so it happens every other year. And the theme of the course is the architects of justice, and the architecture of justice. And what it is it's a interdisciplinary course
Mm-hmm.
where we bring together political science
Yeah.
and architecture, and
Right.
we primarily look at the synergies and contrasts between the two in terms of National Socialism
Mm-hmm.
and memory and reconciliation in post-conflict societies.
Okay.
And so, while we're there, we're examining how memory and reconciliation function in post-conflict societies. We examine the political science portion that I was in charge of. We examined the first 2 weeks are examining the two transitions that Germany went through. The first being in
Right.
1945,
Mm-hmm.
and then the second being in 1989.
Right.
And so you have all this political significance and culture within the city, right?
Yeah.
And then memorialization. You know, Berlin is there's over 2,500 memorials within the city.
Oh, absolutely.
It's saturated.
I mean,
It's
Berlin's
saturated.
a beautiful city.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Town.
It's one of my
and
favorite.
then you don't even know you're inside a memorial until afterwards. You know, I didn't even
Right.
know I was in the Jewish memorial. I was just like, what are these beams? These
Right,
things?
pillars.
These
Yeah.
pillars.
Yeah, yes.
And then they're like, oh, it's
Yeah,
just, you're walking into them.
Exactly.
And you don't realize it.
And that's the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so that's what we do is we go for the first 2 weeks and we go to all these politically significant sites of consciousness and
Mhm.
memory works. And then we delve into the political aspects of that. We're learning international law,
Mhm.
basic politics,
Yeah.
transitional justice, human rights, obviously history. And then the second half of the course, and within this is we're bringing in this concept of how architecture can facilitate
Mhm.
human rights,
Yeah.
and how it can transcend human rights violations. So a side of terror and a side of oppression can then be restored into a side of consciousness and a memory work that can help reflect, bring healing, add truth, create a narrative, right?
Yeah.
Provide voices to people. So that's the first 2 weeks. In the second 2 weeks, they are with Dr. Christina Yu and Corey Greenfield,
Okay.
and they're professors in the architecture building. And they go and they just explore the diversity of architecture
It's like
within Berlin.
Field trips.
Yes, and how it's
Okay.
intertwined with culture, society,
Mm-hmm.
the history, right?
Yeah.
And so and like again, it's all in the context of the rise of National Socialism and all the victims of the Holocaust, and it's just an amazing experience. I mean, it's life changing.
Oh no, it's a I mean, there's so much history there.
Oh yeah,
And you feel like that city's been through a ton of trauma, a ton of just everything.
amazing.
Yeah.
And my first time there, I was there as a student. I took the course,
Oh, okay.
and so now I was able to come back as an instructor,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just amazing. It was amazing.
And how do like these monuments heal people, like on an individual level? Like say, if just Joe Schmo, who didn't necessarily have experience the war, didn't experience. Maybe he was born during the divided country, but was really came into his formative years after like the wall came down. How
Right.
does that affect him? Because I mean, there's secondhand trauma.
Yeah, of
Right.
course, of
Secondhand,
course.
second generation.
Yeah, generational
victims,
trauma. Yes.
right? Which you get it. I mean, it's genetically imprinted.
Right.
You've learned that,
Right.
right? And it's also the oral history traumatizes as well,
Yeah.
right? So, which I mean, I wrote on that.
Right,
which I
right.
told you, the effects of that and the consequences of that. But
And then-
how does that help people?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and an article.
Yeah, I'm
It
asking you to
depends.
write these articles,
Yeah.
right?
I think it just depends, right? It depends
Yeah,
on
just talk
the
about it.
country. It depends. We'll take Germany. That's what I'm familiar with. I've been
Mhm.
there 3-4 times, right?
Right.
There's a thing called German guilt that's inherently instilled
Mhm.
within them for what
Yeah.
occurred, right?
Right.
And I don't. So memory works are not just memory works can include a museum,
Mhm.
a site of consciousness can include a memorial, a statue, and what they're meant to do is to make you reflect at the same time about the past, about the present, and about what's going to happen in the future.
Right.
And so it depends on what the memorialization is meant to do, because you have individual memory and you have collective memory,
Mm-hmm.
and individual and collective memory oftentimes can clash.
Right, because people really don't realize that there's a collective memory.
Yeah. There's
Right.
very much so a collective memory. That's where German guilt comes from, right?
Right.
And so I think it depends on the memorial. So let's say the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe would be a good example.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, I'm African American, coming all the way from the Southwest, right? African, and so I don't have a direct connection. Like,
Right.
my people were not Jewish, right?
Mhm.
But when I go there, I'm able to reflect on what happened. How that could be prevented today,
Right.
beyond the context of Germany, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in the Congo, whatever, the Syria right now, right?
Mhm.
But then I think if you're a German
Yeah.
who's from Germany and you have German guilt, that does something different, right? And
Right.
it makes you reflect on a different part of
Mhm.
your life and
Right.
who you are.
Yeah.
And then if you're a Jewish Holocaust survivor, I've heard testaments where some people love it. They love the idea. Some people say it's not enough, and other people hate it.
Yeah.
So I think it just varies, and that's the complexity and the beauty of memory works. But then again, there's also the side where they can clash and create conflict and more tension within society.
Absolutely. I mean, I but I think of an American kind of monument right now. I got to go to New York City for the first
Uh-huh.
time recently, and I
Yeah.
I went to the memorial
Yeah.
for the Twin Towers.
Yes.
And I had, although I wasn't there when that happened, I mean, everyone talks. Where were you?
Yeah.
Especially with this generation.
Right.
I mean, I'm teaching students at UNM now
Yeah.
that were in preschool.
Yeah.
So they don't have a real memory of it, but something about being there, all of a sudden, there was this PTSD
Mhm.
of just emotion.
Exactly.
I felt this kind of like this eerie feeling inside
Right.
of me.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And it was just, it does work to kind of do that. I realized that all of a sudden I was like, I don't know if at peace, but I just kind of, it felt silent. I
Right.
felt still. I
Yeah.
felt something.
Yeah.
Just
You
being
felt
there.
something. Exactly.
Right. And it's important to have these monuments.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
It is. However, I think we have to. The monuments are very, very critical and important, but at the same time, these monuments they create a certain narrative, and oftentimes it's the narrative that the state wants, right? And we're not talking about New York City and the 9/11 monument at all, not so much. I'm talking about just certain monuments that may be erected after certain conflicts, whether it be genocide, authoritarian rule, that continue to further silence the victims
Can you give me an
or
example?
the minority.
Right.
So in Uganda right now, if you erect a memorial of any kind, you can be punished, thrown
Really?
in prison. Yeah, right. And so that's just a general blanket example of just punishing memorialization,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where else?
It's an attempt to erase history.
Exactly, and that's the thing is that you control the narrative. So let's use again Germany. They're just controlling narrative, right?
Yeah, poor
So-
Germany. Sorry.
No, I love
we love
Germany.
it.
No.
I mean, we love it.
Right.
We love it.
So after
yeah.
we know that the Soviets went in
Yeah.
and they defeated the Germans, right?
Yeah.
They did a lot of work, and so there's a memorial called the Treptow Memorial,
Mm-hmm.
and what it is it acts as both a memorial and as a cemetery. So now we're adding another layer to memorialization because now it's not only a place of memory, it's also
Right.
a place of reflection,
Mm-hmm.
death. It's very very deep. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's massive, right? This memorial was created by the Soviets, right?
Mm.
And so it tells the
During
story
a specific time.
exactly, and so it
Right.
tells the story that the Soviets want to tell.
Yeah.
That these horrible, they came in and they defeated National Socialism, the
Mhm.
Great Communist, right?
Yeah.
And when you first walk in to this amazing memorial. I mean, the Treptow. If you ever get an opportunity to go there, I highly recommend it. It's just amazing. It's massive. It's just like the Soviets would do, right? Everything is
They're
very
just big.
grandiose,
You've
right?
seen the towers out there, yeah.
Right. It's grandiose.
Needle, yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost cult-like, and that's what it is. It's a cult-like monument, because you walk in, and the first statue is of a mother weeping, and she's supposed to be representing the motherland, like
Mhm.
it's a dual representation of the mother and the motherland weeping for the fallen soldiers.
Okay.
And then you turn right and you walk, I don't know, 120, 150 yards to these big opening gates, and then you look out another 200 to 500 yards,
Uh-huh.
and there's wreaths laid, and there's like these pillars on the side that tell the story of how Russia came in and defeated Germany. And then
Wow.
straight ahead, there's this giant, I don't even know how huge it is, this giant statue of a Soviet soldier carrying a little German girl. And it represents the saviors of Germany,
Mhm.
and the defeat of National Socialism. And it's on top of this mausoleum. It's on top of a mausoleum.
Yeah.
Huge. And there's over 70,000 Soviet soldiers buried there. And it's an amazing memorial, but at the same time, it goes back to this idea of telling a certain narrative, right?
Right.
And it doesn't tell the full story.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
I feel like all those both more than one now. I feel the superpowers have been guilty of that, in not just in this country or in their respective countries, but in all over the world, of implementing this kind of narrative through kind of creating these ideologies through structures, through buildings. Through
yes,
through
very much so.
whatever,
Yes,
right?
that's very much so. Very much so.
Yeah.
And that's part of the course that I was teaching is looking
Right.
at how architecture facilitates human rights violations, and et cetera, et cetera.
And these monuments are meant to. Some of them are meant to make you feel small,
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh, very much.
because there's these massive structures.
Oh, they're massive, and then and then there's amazing monuments that aren't massive, that are very small, but
Mhm.
have such a huge impact. And for instance, we'll say Babel Platz Memorial.
Okay.
And for those who are familiar, you'll know what Babel Platz is. For those who don't, it's the time period when the Nazis were coming to power in the early 1930s, 1933, 1934. And they decided to burn the books of Humboldt University's library.
Mm-hmm.
And so they took out all the scholarly works, and they had a big program in the middle of the square in front of Humboldt University.
Yeah.
And they burnt these books to symbolize the burning of anything that contrasted National Socialism, that challenged the ideology of National Socialism.
Yeah.
And so there was very famous authors and gay rights activists within Germany at the time, who were banished, and a bust of their head was put on a statue. Matter of fact, Henry Hirschfeld, and and he was banished from Germany, and he died in France. But it was just to signify, you know, the decline of the intelligentsia within Germany at the time and the rise of National Socialism. And so now this little square, the memorial is really really deep. It's like it's a square probably 3 by 3.
Yeah.
And you look down into the floor, and it's a representation of the library, and it holds the exact amount of books that were burnt at that time. And I think it's somewhere between like 5 to 20,000. I can't remember the exact number, but
Right.
you know, so you have a very small monument that oftentimes is walked over every single day. People walk on it,
And
right?
they don't realize what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you have these grandiose monuments, and so it's amazing what they can do. But then there's the flip side, and Germans will say, well, it's oversaturated. There's too many monuments. This guilt, it's overbearing. Like over 2,500 memorials, right?
Yeah.
And so,
How much is too much? Well, I mean, which leads me to I think it's in Argentina where there's a group of people actually kind of trying to minimize the dictatorship there,
okay.
and that's happening recently, right? Kind of. Do you feel like as of recently there's kind of this attempt to kind of undo again what the memory that has already, or the reconciliation that has already happened, and maybe painting the dictatorship as not being all that bad?
Yeah, I think there's a global phenomenon of lack of empirics and opinion trumping facts. Yeah, I think there is a global phenomenon of that, and that I think that a lot of that comes from people seeing its effects in America, where you can just spout opinion rather than empirics and facts, and your opinions matter because that's what you say rather than the actual facts, the actual what's. And so, I don't know.
You seem kind of. Is it a tough topic, or is it we're just gonna spiral out of control with that one?
Rephrase the question again, because I think I was going somewhere with it. So.
Where were you going? Let's go. Let's follow.
I don't even remember where I was going anymore because I think I was trying not to say something, and I was trying to keep it PG-13. So.
We can cuss on here, man.
Okay, I didn't know the rules.
Yeah. No, you can cuss on here. And you
So
can
you're
do
just
whatever you
thinking
want.
like, is it like people lying or erasing or minimizing that the dictatorships are not so bad? Yes.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yes. There is a attack of media. It's a global phenomenon around the world that there's a attack of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of association. Yeah, all over the world. This is not just an isolated incident. We
It's
see
not just
this.
happening in the US.
No, yeah, everywhere.
Yeah.
Journalists are being attacked. Truth tellers.
What happened? What set this off, man?
Well, I mean, some people would say, I don't know. A lot of people would say different things, but some would say globalization is one, right?
Okay.
And then some would say that this is the repudiation of globalization, that, you know, people are tired of liberal elites, you know, but I don't know. I mean, that's what they would claim, right? They would claim that liberal elites have ruined it, that this system of globalization and, you know, interconnected world where commerce and information and goods move freely has been detrimental.
Okay.
Others would say it's not been detrimental. Others would say that it's helped less developed countries like China, that America, during this whole time of globalization, became very, very wealthy, right? And now it's just equal playing field. Now it's just time for other people to play in the same playing field that America dominated.
So who won so if the war was all about the superpower, figuring out who the superpower was, who's the superpower, and is it all just pretty much an economics game?
No, I mean,
can you divorce the two? And is, like, say, capitalism married to a form of politics, and is socialism and communism married to a form of politics, or can they be different? Are they one and the same?
Damn, those are a lot of questions.
Yeah, I'm asking. I'm just laying it on you, man.
So the first one, what was the first question? Oh man, are you keeping tally?
No.
Okay. The first one was, can you frame the first question?
Oh yeah. No. So what I was asking is there, is it all economic?
Oh no.
Right.
No.
Is it?
No.
Is there no line? Can we divorce money in politics? Is it all economic incentive to, as far as like getting, is this the way it is now?
International?
Yeah.
We're talking international?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess we're seeing that, right? Can you divorce money? So we see Trump moving towards protectionism, moving away from signing multilateral treaties when it comes to trade, security, protection, to bilateral.
Okay.
Leaving the single market, right? Kind of, not so much like Great Britain leaving the single market, but pretty much creating a whole ripple effect throughout the world.
Yeah.
Who is the superpower? And is it go back? So the superpower, it depends. If you believe in realism, you would say absolutely not. America's still the superpower because we have all the nukes. We have the most sophisticated, highly advanced, and most highly funded military in the world and in history. So a realist would say no. A liberal would say, yeah, it is all about economics. And so if it is all about economics, then China is becoming the superpower.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
you need to move your mic
because away.
Yeah.
Okay,
down.
sorry.
That's
right
good.
there.
Yeah. You're good.
And so I think some people would say if since Trump came into office this last 6 or 7 months, I think China has signed over 700 multilateral treaties when it comes to trade.
Yeah.
It's really right, and we know China's has its hands in economic development in Africa.
Yeah.
That the South China Sea dispute right now, they're moving to create more land mass for themselves. But then you also have, so that's on the economic side, right? But then you have Putin. And Putin is, because there's hard power and there's soft power.
Okay.
And, Putin was ranked as being the smartest man in the world in front of Obama, even the most powerful man in the world.
Really?
Yeah. Even during Obama's 2 terms, he was still most influential man in the world was Putin, due to his international relations.
Have you heard of his tactics? Well, he uses very kind of like Angela Merkel came in and he knows for a fact that she's scared of dogs. And he had his Rottweiler there with him.
Well, he's former KGB.
Right. So he uses these little things against the world leaders to kind of put them into submission.
Well, yeah, and I had the opportunity of going to the University of Bologna and studying EU external policy pertaining to human rights.
Yeah.
And Putin is he doesn't like the EU at all. He wants to dismantle the EU.
Is it jealousy because he's not part of it?
No, I think Putin is a realist. I would argue that Putin is one of the last realists alive.
Realist meaning what? 'Cause I feel like
Realism.
you mean a lot.
So in the term of when we talk about realism, we're talking about that state power is derived through guns. Bottom line, to make a very complicated idea, right? It's at the end of the day that those with the guns have the power.
Okay.
And when we talk about liberals, and when going back to realism, it's this inherent belief that each state is for itself. International relations is itself. Each state is for itself. It's an anarchic system, right? There's no world government.
Right.
People would say the UN. Well, no. The UN's not. The ICC. There's no world government. There's no police force. Well, that could be argued because there may be a police force for less developed countries, known as the Western countries, but that's a whole. But in theory, and so realism is the belief that at the end of the day, those with the guns rule. They make the rules.
Okay.
They're the hegemon within the international.
So he's the last one.
He's the last one that thinks like that. He's the last one that thinks that power moves, hard power moves.
Okay.
At the end of and it's warfare, and whether it's now we're moving into cyber warfare, not so much conventional, and so we all know that and we don't want to beat a dead horse and talk about the Russia scandal, but what I'm saying is that Putin's a very smart man, and he undermines not only the American elections, he undermined the elections in Montenegro because he doesn't want those small. His idea is the former Soviet Union must rise.
It's back to the idea of like making Russia great again.
Exactly. Yes.
Right.
Making Russia again.
When reality, like when were these places fucking great? I mean, because there were still, making America great again, right?
Right.
It's when there was still a lot of discrimination, racism,
Jim Crow laws,
right? There was poverty. There was. When are you talking about this? When was Russia great? Maybe the Soviet Union, was it great when they were spending all their money on all these things, and that's what essentially bankrupt them.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would say the Soviet Union was not great. I think especially those in East Germany, the former Baltic states, right?
Right.
But then you have, right, but we also are Americans. And so, right, we have maybe a jaded perspective, because when you ask the people surveys of their support for Putin and the Russian state, they love him. They love him.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this deep distrust of America, and there's this deep trust that Putin is doing what's right for the people.
You know, is that them speaking, or them being told by media and all this that this is what's happening, them kind of buying into that and then being pulled?
I think
Because I mean, media influences.
I think
that's
people.
bottom line.
Of course it does. Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. But I
Yeah.
think that that Russian people actually believe in Putin. I do. I really do. Of all the interviews,
Right.
everything I've read, I think that the Russian people,
Yeah.
they believe in Putin.
Yeah.
And not all of them, of course. There's, the defectors, but I think the people believe in Putin, and they believe in. And they don't.
Do you think that happened because there was no transition? Putin came to power because maybe was there a transition in Russia? In the form of Soviet Union?
Well,
Or was there? What I notice is when I look at the stuff is like there's a lot of talk of transition, and I feel like a lot of the time there's just a lack of transition.
well, yeah. It's like, well, what is the
In
transition,
general.
right? What is the transition? That's another question. When does the transition occur?
Yeah.
In the Soviet Union, because there was so many different little states and small countries that were divvied up, right? There's the former Yugoslavia, there's the Baltic states.
Right.
To say, has it happened, you have to go case by case. But not a lot, not in the Soviet Union, no. They didn't really believe in transition too much.
Yeah.
However, it did happen in World War II. The Soviets did give out certain amounts of reparations, and they did give out certain compensation, but it was very selective on who they gave the reparations out to, and they didn't give it out for a long period of time.
Okay.
And so, the Soviets, I mean, it's communism.
So, I mean, I'm all about looking at other people and blaming people for my problems, but how about we look at ourselves? Has there been any reparations in the United States for anything of the trauma that's gone on here?
Yeah, there's been a couple instances.
What are some of the big ones?
The Japanese internment camp, they've received reparations.
They did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jewish Americans have received, but they lived here, and so they're receiving reparations.
Like on behalf
of the German state, and it depends on how the
Okay.
reparations were dullied. So there's individual reparations and there's collective reparations.
Okay.
And then there's different organizations that would advocate for different reparation interests. And so
Mhm.
the Roma and the Sintis haven't received reparations.
Okay.
So that's outside the states. African Americans, there's been certain instances where African Americans have, but it's been more environmental. There was an environmental leak down in Louisiana
Mm-hmm.
when a lot of the community was predominantly African American. They received reparations.
But
have
it
there
was
been,
for that
yes,
event.
exactly,
It wasn't-
selective. No, has there been
Okay.
reparations for Jim Crow? Has there been collective reparations for Jim Crow and the draconian state endorsed period of lynching where over 25 or 3,000, 4,000 people on record were lynched? That's just on record, right? That's just
Right.
what we know of on record.
Yeah.
No, there hasn't been a collective effort for reparations for that. But, has there been collective reparations for Jim Crow laws that discriminated for, that kept African Americans out of the housing market? No.
No.
Has there been for slavery? No. But then again, you get into the question of, should there be? And in what form do they come?
Right.
Well, and the reason I just asked should there be is because, given the racial climate and the racial tension of this country, is that even a subject to be broached right now? Or should we just focus?
Maybe we're not right now.
Right, you know what I'm saying,
I
right?
mean, I see your point.
Or
Yeah.
even or this idea is that, has it even been too long? Should we not even talk about reparations for slavery? Which I'm not saying, but I'm just saying those would argue it's been too long.
Right.
And
Focus on what's happened most recently.
Right. But then, there are parallels, and there's a long line that you can say, well, I can draw human rights violations dating back from slavery when it comes to police brutality all the way to current times. Right?
Because it's all linked.
Yeah, it's all linked when it comes
Right.
to the exclusion of higher education until, as of recently, African Americans have been excluded for hundreds of years. So reparations, what I'm saying is that reparations doesn't have to come in the form of monetary value all the time. It can come in the form of education, healthcare, housing,
Yeah.
whatever context-specific needs to the victims. And so, do I believe that reparations should happen here? That's a whole another podcast. But, you know, and some Native Americans have received reparations, but not all, because it depends on the tribe.
Okay. So, I mean, it's been picked and choose
Yes.
kind of deal.
Yeah. Reparations is a very interesting.
Has there been any kind of commemoration of, I mean, there's been some monuments, right?
Yeah, well, actually, there was, I think in 2013 or 12, the resurrections of the Martin Luther King Memorial in D.C.
Okay.
Right, so that's pretty huge. And then there's a museum, the African American Smithsonian Museum in D.C. that just opened this year. And then I think there's also the African American International Museum in South Carolina.
So museums are big ones, right?
Well, because that's where it's going. Museums are turning into memory works.
Well, because you also want the people that it's affecting to have access to these.
Exactly.
Because that's how this stuff works.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
Or at least it's supposed to.
That's how it's supposed to. It's supposed to be for the public, and museums. The new trend I would say within memory works is utilizing museums, creating a side of consciousness to both reflect.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe something happened there where the museum was erected, right?
Yeah.
And so then it becomes a site of conscious. So like,
right.
It was, like I said, once a site of horror, now turned into a place of learning, reflection, and a warning of what not to do in the future, right?
Right.
And how to treat our fellow man and how humanity should act, and just reminding us of our moral compass.
Which is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, and so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a long way to go.
Oh yeah, I mean, so it seems grim, you know, it seems grim.
Yeah.
But then, some would argue that this is the most peaceful time in history. That for 70 years we haven't had a major international war among superpowers.
I mean, I've seen like the presentations and stuff saying that.
Right.
The Great Peace or whatever.
Right, the Great Peace, right, and this idea of democratic peace. But then I would argue, well, maybe not amongst superpowers, but then we have civil conflicts, protracted civil conflicts that usually that just spiral. So the transition will occur, then it's usually more outbreak, and it's called a conflict trap.
Yeah.
And most, like, I think 89 or 90% of the conflicts right now are just reoccurring conflicts.
Okay.
And so it's like, well, there's an instance of relative peace amongst the superpowers, but, you know, you have
civil unrest
in the Congo, known as World War III, where over 6 million Africans have died.
Yeah.
And no one talks about it, right? And so, peace for who, right? Justice for who?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, my, our colleague, Sam Johnson, do you remember him?
Vaguely.
Okay. Well,
oh, Sam, yeah.
He came, he was talking about how, he's white privileged. He just feels so guilty all the time.
Oh, wow.
Well, he was just talking about how he's moving in. He's like, I move in and the housing market goes up, you know.
Oh, wow.
He's like, they built a Whole Foods, and he was just talking about how we were playing a game saying, when was Machu Picchu discovered? When was America discovered? And he made some really good points as well about how, like, well, these places existed. How were they? What do you mean they were discovered? They were built by man, right? But it's like, who were they discovered by?
Of course.
It didn't matter until the colonizers arrived, until the Europeans arrived. Right. So it's not until a certain demographic or a certain group of people want it to happen, is that it actually happens.
Right.
And how are you gonna make that happen? How are you gonna convince them? Do you just take them out of power? Or is it just as simple as what you said before the show started? We got to get money out of politics.
Yeah, man. That was in the context of domestic.
I feel like, but I think that applies to a lot of places, not just domestically.
You think you could never divorce money from international relations.
That's what it is.
Yeah, it's just international political economy. I mean, that's the basis of international relations.
It's trade.
It's trade.
Yeah.
It's security, trade of information, trade of goods. And so, you'll never really... But, how to fix the international community, I don't know. How to bring some type of peace or stability. What I focus on is bringing peace and stability in the aftermath of conflict. That's where my research and my research agenda.
Oh, yeah, I'm not asking you to solve the world's problems. I'm just asking you to talk about it. Tim's here to solve the world's problems, everyone.
No, but, yeah, you can't really you can't separate money. No. I mean, that's when it goes back again to globalization and trade, right? We see
Yeah.
Great Britain, they left the EU, they left the single market.
Well,
right.
they hasn't gone down.
Not
yet.
officially, right? Not legally, but they're in the
voted to.
process, right?
Yeah.
And they're leaving. I mean, and Great Britain was the creator of these markets. I mean, it was their naval ships in the early part of the century in the 17th, 1800s that established these trade routes that we still use today. And but them leaving the single market, you just can't, because you need money. There's only a finite amount of resources and money in this world, and each country has their own specific interest at hand, right?
Absolutely.
And so, no, you can't separate those two, not in the international. I think in the domestic you can. There should be caps put on how much money certain individuals can fundraise and raise. And I think that it would level the playing field. I think that it'd be great. But
That's why I'm all over the map. I tend to be like, okay, well, money, transitional justice.
No, that's fine, because it all,
It's all interconnected.
But let's bring it. We could bring it together. Actually, I think that's a leading area right now within transitional justice, is that people are calling for development and transitional justice within it, because what they're arguing is that reparations are fine, right? Reparations are meant to basically put people in the state that they were in prior to the Civil War or authoritarian rule. Oftentimes, this could be problematic, especially given if it's a country that's discriminatory against women, right?
Yeah.
Structural violence, structural poverty.
Yeah.
And so putting somebody back into the situation that they were once in before the Civil War could be possibly worse than the aftermath of the Civil War.
Yeah.
And so now people are calling for development, redistribution of land, giving people adequate jobs.
Access to resources.
Right, and changing the actual society itself, right? Breaking down discriminatory norms against women and gender.
Yeah.
And so I think now, and what they argue is that these reparations, they're doing nothing but putting people back into a negative state. So let's focus more on development and changing the community, and then we'll see some change. Because a lot of times when these loans are given out from the IMF or from the World Bank, in order for reparations, there's conditionalities attached to them. So like, I don't know, 50-70% interest, something that the country cannot pay back. And so you just keep pulling out loans on top and interest on top of more loans on loans. And so it puts these countries in just this economic state of despair.
They can't get out.
And they can't get out. And
so it's almost worth it not to give reparations.
So the structural base of the society remains the same: inequality, poverty, gender, discrimination, right?
Because it's cheaper and more affordable not to do anything.
Right, and so just by the international community or by the state just giving quote-unquote reparations, well, what is that really doing for society? And maybe it's creating further tension, right? Because now there's a hierarchy within victimhood. Well, why did Oscar receive reparations for property damage, but I got a limb chopped off and I haven't received anything? And so you create this hierarchy of victimhood within transitional justice, and so dividing the community itself. Yeah. And so people are calling for development and economic, like taking the reparations control away from the executive and the judiciary, because oftentimes the executive and the judiciary within a country, in the aftermath, they could be corrupt, or they can just have too much on their plate and not have time to really give the victims what they need. You know what I'm saying? Because they have to build banks, they have to rewrite laws, they have state capacity to handle. And so taking away the decision-making power away from the executive and the judiciary when it comes to reparations, I think would be a huge step forward.
Okay. Okay, so when are you running for president?
No.
The question on everyone's minds.
No, it would be cool. But
have you thought about running for office? You want it? So So you're getting your doctorate, or were?
So I'm transitioning out of the doctoral program now.
Talk about transitions.
I'm going to go to law school.
What do you want to do with law school?
I think.
Well, you think?
Yeah. So like, I'm on the fence now.
You should have gone to that tower in Italy, man.
Yeah, I know.
He was talking about this tower. If you go to the top, you're not going to finish your studies, and he did it.
Yes, and below that.
And now it's happening.
Yeah, and so when I was I got the opportunity to study at the Klingendale Institute, and
Right,
in The
right.
Hague, the Netherlands. And I met this woman named Dr. Valerie Rousseau, and she specializes in memory and reconciliation in post-conflict societies.
Okay.
And I hit it off. We were talking, and then I was able, during the symposium, I was able to have dinner with her and some other colleagues. And then she asked me, would you be interested in going to school in Brussels, in Belgium? And I was like, at the time, I was like, not really, because I was going to UNM. I already had everything set up.
Yeah.
I said, maybe. Well, then I just started thinking, and my research interest started to go in a different direction. And then I just contacted her, and she said she would love to have me. Actually, she gave a presentation in Berlin for me.
Okay.
And then it was about the concept of reconciliation, and is it even possible in post-conflict societies, which is a whole podcast is really cool too, actually.
Yeah.
You should do one on that, actually, and the concept of reconciliation, right?
Well,
Because
you seem to be the foremost expert in all of it.
no.
Okay.
And so I just contacted her, and so now I have an opportunity to study at the University of UC Leuven,
Mm-hmm.
which is the oldest university in Belgium, and in the Belgian Highlands,
Okay.
and that whole area, Belgium, Luxembourg.
Yeah. I've never been.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, Belgium was great.
Okay.
And Brussels. I've been to Brussels and Bruges, and
Okay.
and so if I get it, I'll be there for 4 years, and
That's good.
they give me full funding. But then there's law school, because I also, in The Hague, I was around a lot of lawyers and law students, and also at the University of Bologna.
But they complain about how many lawyers there is.
Yeah, that's true. So I don't
Just
know.
throwing it out there.
I don't know. So right now my goal is, what I'm doing though is I'm working to apply for UC Leuven, and if I get it, I'll be in Brussels this time.
What's your goal with your life? What do you want to do?
Well, I want to be a practitioner and academic. I want to teach at the university level, but I also
Okay.
want to be a practitioner within human rights and transitional justice.
Okay.
So I want to either work for the UN as well,
Yeah.
whether that's through litigation. I can be in human rights, whether it's through litigation with my law degree,
Yeah.
or I can go the more theoretical and practical route, whether it be analyzing logistics, helping with humanitarian aid on the ground.
Yeah.
So we're working for an IGO and NGO, and so I just want to be involved in some way, right?
You want
And
to
so-
help people.
Yeah, I just want to
Yeah.
help people, and and then I get criticized and say, well, you should help America first, and this and that, and it's like, well, this world's interconnected, and whether you like it or not, globalization has occurred.
It's already done.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
done, and it's going to continue to happen. There may be a few roadblocks from Trump and a few other people, protectionists, maybe Great Britain, and people who don't really care for globalization. And I'm not saying globalization has been the best for certain people, but it's not going to. Globalization is happening, and it's going to continue to happen, because we may have a shift when it comes to world leaders and putting roadblocks, but at the same time we have technology bringing us further together. So right now, somebody in Russia, somebody in Gambia, somebody in Nepal could be watching this live stream,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so the people are going to come together. What the people want is always going to come together, but the politicians and the elites, they may throw in a few roadblocks, but globalization is here to stay. And I personally think that America is going to be hurting when it comes to these bilateral treaties, and it comes to the economy. I think that it's going to be
Absolutely.
detrimental rather than good for us. But yeah,
Well, you just kind of maybe got to let it do its thing.
that's
For
what
it
some
to
people
kind
are
of-
saying.
Just to let it be, I'm like, all right, have at it. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Which is when you have kids, like how many kids do you have?
I have one 12-year-old daughter now.
So when you have, it's kind of the urgency becomes a lot greater.
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
You can see it impacting your little one.
Yeah, and
know?
that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like I just need this final. I have a master's, and I don't feel like personally it's good enough.
Yeah.
I just need that last. And I know paper's not everything. It doesn't, but I just
I'm
need
the same
that.
way. I need a little bit more.
I just need either that JD or that doctorate. The Juris Doctorate or the PhD. And
to help you do what you want to do, I think.
to help
that's-
me do what I want to do.
And I'm along the same lines. What I want to do, it gives you, what's the word?
Legitimacy?
Legitimacy, to an extent.
Yeah, yeah.
People see the letters.
Yeah, they
and
do.
They assume they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
And that's what it is, especially if you're in a certain line of work.
Exactly.
And then it also provides you with an expertise
Yeah, exactly.
to really do your job well.
Exactly.
And to think critically at a level that needs to, that you need to kind of help people out.
Exactly.
large scale.
Exactly.
So I don't know. I mean, we can start wrapping up, I guess.
Okay, yeah.
We do
Yeah.
have a question.
Yeah, for sure.
Hosebeats is asking, is there an example of a country that is successful at transitional justice?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
Or-
Thanks for the question.
Maybe, I don't know what successful necessarily means for that,
Yeah.
but, you know, there's probably a spectrum.
No, yeah, I think, yeah, I don't think it's dichotomous. Like you
Yeah.
said, right, I think there is a spectrum. I think it runs on the spectrum of what is successful and what is not. So, and it depends on the context of the country and the conflict. So, in the case of genocide, in the case of Rwanda, I think some would say just getting the people to stop killing one another is successful, right?
Yeah.
Right, and then the second step would be getting the people to stop killing one another, and then living amongst each other. Because you have to remember, so the difference between World War II and Rwanda is, you know, World War II they got to go home, they got to go back to their
Yeah.
intercontinental borders, France, Germany,
Yeah.
America, right?
Yeah.
But in Rwanda, these are your next door neighbors.
Yeah.
You know, this is somebody you grew up with your whole life. You went to grade school with, middle school, high school, and now they're knocking on your door with a machete, or they've killed and maimed you. And so,
Yeah.
it depends on the context of the country. So Rwanda, some people would say yes, it's been very successful, that the people stopped killing each other, and that for 20 years they've lived in relatively peaceful conditions, right?
Right.
Others would say, well, that is starting to temper, and there's becoming a lot of tension within the community, given that the transition wasn't completely successful, because oftentimes when victims get into power, then they can themselves become perpetrators. And so there was a thing called the Gacaca courts in Rwanda, and during this time, the Tutsis were in charge. I'm sorry, the Hutus were in charge, and it was seen as victor's justice, and they were kind of doling out justice that may have not been impartial and according to the rule of law. Right. There may be some.
What they saw just.
Right, and so I think
Yeah.
it depends on the country. But another successful case would be South Africa. They transitioned from apartheid to the first black elected president, democratically elected president of the country, Nelson Mandela.
Yeah.
And their Truth Commission is heralded as one of the foremost truth commissions that is used during transitional justice. Like all other, it's like the archetype of a truth commission.
Okay.
And so it just depends. I mean, and then there's, I don't know. There's just little instances, and I think it just depends on the people. You have to ask the community what's successful and what's not.
Right.
Right? Because you had the, the lustration in the Soviet Union
Yeah.
after the fall of the Soviet. Some people would say that was great, and they got all the nepotism and corruption out.
Yeah.
But then others would say, well, then there was institutional memory that happened, so people can't run these institutions that we need running because they're not trained, they don't have the education, because you fired and cleansed everybody.
Yeah.
So there's always these two sides of what the argument is, right?
Yeah.
And then there's
yeah.
memorialization within Berlin. That's effective. I
Yeah.
mean, I taught a course there.
Yeah.
I mean, so it depends on the country.
Okay. That's a very thorough. That's
Yeah.
good though. No, it's true though, because it just varies.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. There's not one way to path to success.
Right.
And who views it as successful?
Exactly.
And
Who views
who's
it
the
as
beneficiary?
Exactly. Who's the beneficiary?
So yeah.
And then there's the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and is that successful?
I mean, if you can't prosecute or pursue certain people, is it ever really successful?
That's the question, is it? And so there's some that say no, it's not successful.
Yeah.
Because you have to be a signatory to the ICC in order for you to be prosecuted within its courts.
You have
But
to be
then-
willing to
right, you have
pay
to be
for it.
willing to be
Yeah.
a part of this ICC, International Criminal Court, which makes it a miracle when you think about state sovereignty. But I would say yes, that even though you may not be able to prosecute everybody, you can prosecute some.
Yeah.
And even prosecuting one or two perpetrators for somebody, that's justice.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, and it's fighting impunity, because given today's state, in Syria, Duterte in the Philippines,
Yeah.
I mean, we have to fight impunity and try these perpetrators of human rights
At
violations.
every level.
Yeah, at every level.
Yeah.
Regional, domestic.
We have another question from
Yeah.
Hosebeats.
Nice.
How long does it take for a country to get over something as horrible as genocide, if at all? 2, 3, 4 generations? Is it even possible to recover?
Damn.
Yeah,
Great question.
that's a deep one.
That is very, I mean, wow.
I mean, is it even safe to say that, we're recovered?
Right.
Because at that
Yeah.
point, I mean, you're obviously, I think that if you're saying that, then they probably haven't. And you're aware of the fact that maybe there's an issue.
Yeah, I don't know.
I guess
don't
it
know, let's-
depends on how you define recovery.
Yeah,
It
right.
depends on how you, because all these,
Yeah.
they're just words, but you can add any definition
Totally.
to these.
It's kind of the same as the
Yeah, I
other
mean-
question.
Yeah,
let's think of some instances.
yeah.
So you have Cambodia. You have the Cambodian genocide.
Mm-hmm.
Tensions are still high there. We have Rwanda, right? Then we have of course, the Holocaust, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the Armenian genocide, which you can't even speak about, and which is actually forgotten about. which
Right.
Yeah, a
hasn't
lot of
been-
people don't realize.
Right, yeah. So, oh man, that's a great
you
question.
have to think back to like maybe an incident that happened a long time ago.
And it goes back to reconciliation.
If
It
it's, yeah.
goes back to this question of reconciliation when he asked, or she, asked, how long does it take to get over? I don't know if you can ever get over it, and it goes back to individual and collective memory. Because there's
Yeah.
individuals who will never get over it. I've read testaments and talked to people who have said that, don't ask me about forgiveness because they took that away in the concentration camp.
Mm.
Or they took away, reconciliation or forgiveness the
Yeah.
minute that they killed my son.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how many generations, but the key is to implement these mechanisms and try to balance them out so that they complement one another. So reparations, memorial works, trials, truth commissions, so that way there's a fine line where they can move forward. In South Africa would be an example.
Mhm.
I think it's a bad example only given that the civil aspect and the social aspect of South Africa was successful. When we look at economics, because there's different transitions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the economic transition in South Africa, the majority of wealth is still concentrated amongst the white, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
those living in poverty are still black to
Oh,
this day.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. I mean, the only way I could see it, and it's counterintuitive, like is if like it's gone so well and it's reconciliated that to the sense that people don't worry about it anymore, and they've forgotten. But at the same time, if you've forgotten it, are you erasing that history?
Of course,
And
you can't forget.
So I think where is there? That I feel like that's the only point where like maybe you're kind of okay.
Yeah?
If it's so good, you're like, okay, it's done, and then you forget. But is forgetting good? No.
No.
So it's never done.
No, it's not.
Never done.
And I think Germany would be the closest example to
Yeah.
the archetype of a successful transition,
Okay.
because it went through two of them.
Yeah.
However, the first was more successful than the second because those who were part of the SED, part of the Soviet Union,
Yeah.
Eastern Germany, a lot of those people were not tried. There are still people that walk around who were part of the Stasi prisons who would torture people and interrogate them who are walking around free to this day.
On the Soviet side.
Oh yeah, tons of
Oh,
people,
yeah.
thousands of people. You have to remember that this
Whoa.
is deep. This is deep.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is like
Oh,
there was-
the whole country.
there's
was
a
involved
the
to
whole
an extent,
country to
yeah.
a point where your husband would inform the government.
Yeah, yeah.
There was a case I read actually where a woman went to trial against the Soviet state, and all those personal things that she was saying were only things that she told her husband, and then come to find out her husband was an informant for like 10 years to the
Oh, wow.
Soviet people. Yeah. So yeah, it ran deep. I mean, they would scour through the latrines to make sure to get information.
Yeah.
And so, but I think Germany would be a successful case, and I don't know about getting over, but they have a grasp on what has happened, how to move forward, and how to never forget.
Yeah.
So,
But it can also, it's very tenuous. It can be undone.
yeah.
Always.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Always. It can always be undone. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very much so.
All right.
So.
Cool. I think we're good.
Yeah.
Right on. Thank you guys for watching.
Yeah, thank you.
That was
Thank you for
awesome.
having me.
Thank you
Yeah.
for being on, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
If you have something else you want to talk about, let me know.
All right,
You're welcome
cool.
to come back on.
All
Thank
right.
you so
cool.
much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
All right.